Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WorkTango webinar series. My name is Rob Catalano with WorkTango and excited to be here and seeing all the wonderful folks sharing where they're in from today. All over North America, I'm seeing. Make sure your two is to everyone versus just host and panelists, so everyone can see it. But we got folks from all over the place. A couple of places I've lived in the past, in San Francisco and in Toronto, and amazing to have you all here. I think we're over 110 people that have joined so far. Josh, where are you here from today?
Portland, Oregon. Although I was
Awesome.
I was recently in the Bay Area. We moved up here after 20 years in the Bay Area.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to just give people a minute to go from their one meeting to another in this distributed world that we're in, and we'll get started. And just by introduction again, my name is Rob Catalano. I work with WorkTango and support a lot of these webinar series we put on to help educate, inspire our community. And excited a lot of you are here. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And today our topic is around how to build work better in this distributed world we find ourselves with, and talking specifically about 3 tools to help strengthen your culture in these types of environments that we have. So there'll be some interactivity today on the chat. If you do have Q&A, there's a separate Q&A button in Zoom where you can place that in there. You could see other people's questions, you can upvote them and try to get to some at the end. And this question comes up quite a bit. It will be recorded, so we'll have that available for folks to review later. Now, in terms of the topic today, what I wanted to show was the next slide that identifies how I think the world is looking, and how I think this depicts how companies are struggling in this distributed world, right? And it's really hard to build this level of connection that organizations once had, and through the pandemic, I've had the opportunity to work with so many organizations that are trying to improve connection, improve culture, and do so in this type of environment where it's been a lot more challenging to do it. And we kept hearing that despite it being 2+ years into pandemic, it's still on people's minds. And we really wanted to bring in an expert today to talk about this topic, which is why you see Josh here. And before I dive into Josh's introduction, we wanted to get a level set and a table setting of how everyone's feeling on the call today. So I want to launch a quick poll that asks 3 simple questions. How has your team distribution changed over the past 2 years? Is it more distributed? Has it stayed the same? Is it less? 2, comparing to before the pandemic, how do you feel about your connection to your team? Right? Are you more, stayed, less connected? And the third question is the same question, but not just your team, but your actual overall company. Now, we're going to take a few moments to get some of these details, and we'll share the details in a moment. But I did want to move on and actually introduce our speaker, Josh, and we'll get into the results while those get tabulated. But if you haven't met Josh before or seen him, I think he's a great guy. He's also the author of Great Mondays, which is a book, but also the principal of a consultancy called Great Mondays. And what his organization does, which I love, is he works with culture leaders to design cultures that attract, that retain, that engage top talent. And he's worked with numerous organizations, including ones we all know, like IBM, UCSF Health, the DC Public Library, and more. Now, I've actually worked with Josh on working with our customers or our communities in these types of workshops, and wanted to bring him back about this topic that a lot of us are still struggling with. And I'm also excited because he's launching a new radio a show called Great Mondays. And he's actually always looking for great culture leaders to be guests or people to actually listen in, obviously, and hear what he has to say. So I'm going to shoot some stuff in the chat right now that you can actually connect with Josh, but also sign up for his 1 Minute Mondays, where there'll be more information about that. Again, I've seen a lot of value in working with Josh in the past. So I wanted to have him share his knowledge and wisdom of crowds on what he's seen in his world. So that being said, I thought I'd hand it over to you, Josh, but just wanted to end the poll so that we can kind of get a sense of what are people thinking about? What are they living these days? We're just sharing that now with everyone. But welcome. Thank you for being here. And
Yeah.
I occasionally have window people cleaners join these calls. It's happened before. He's
Oh,
just so interested in what you have to say today. He might jump
right.
in.
Hopefully not February in Toronto. They're sending people out there, but that's, I guess it's always possible. Hey, everybody. Josh Levine here. I am on a mission to help more organizations build the kind of culture that employees love. And the reason why is because I believe culture is a really powerful tool to improve employee lives as well as bottom lines. And so that's what I'm trying to do, just broadly speaking. And today, what I want to talk about is how we deal with this distributed world and the reason we might all feel a little less connected. So I'm looking at the poll right now. And so it looks like majority of people have become more distributed over the past 2 years. You feel a little bit less connected with your team, and about the same, maybe 42% said the same with their company, maybe kind of an even split, stayed the same or less connected, but certainly not more connected. And I think this is really important because we're talking about connectivity is kind of the key way that culture and work gets done. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of launch into this. One quick thing before I do, I just wanted to share the reason why I sort of have this term. Great Mondays is the book. It's the podcast. It's all this stuff. I believe that when you know what you do, why you do what you do, that you're going to be able to, and are aligned with that, you're going to be able to show up to work and be able to be excited about the kind of work that you do, no matter what day of the week, right? So there's sort of that trope of like TGIF. So for me, it's like, that's the value proposition. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do, is really be able to articulate that, this is something that's really powerful. So I actually have coffee mugs that are TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. So awesome. Very good. I'm really excited. I'm going to start with this. This is a picture of my son. I'm showing a picture of Lucas to you, not just because he's adorable, which he is, but also because I want to tell you a quick story. So this was from about 8 years ago. He was about 8. He's 16 now. And we had just moved into a new house. And I don't know if you've ever moved into a new house or a new condo or a new apartment, but if it's even a little bigger than the one you just came from, you don't have enough to fill. You don't have enough furniture, enough stuff to kind of fill it. And so what we had done we had a new basement, like a playroom. And so we just kind of bought a crappy carpet from like Home Depot to cover the floor. And we had lived there for about 6 months, and we had actually, finally got invested in some, the carpet tiles, those floor tiles. They came. We're excited. It's a Sunday afternoon. My wife and I are rolling up this carpet, and we're trying to, we're going to shove it in the back of the car. It's this huge thing. We're going to try to donate it. And it's like Sunday night, and sun's setting, and we're like trying to get dinner and all this stuff. So we're just like hustling. And my wife turned and noticed that Lucas was kind of sad and teary-eyed a little bit. And she stopped and said, "What's going on?" And he said, "I love that carpet." And we were like, "What are you talking about? It's been here for less than a year. Like, what is happening?" And it was a moment that could have easily passed by. And we could have easily been like, go play on the iPad, kid. But the moment, luckily, we were able to be aware and saw this. And so we stopped and we're like, "What's going on?" And he just felt, for whatever reason, felt attached to the carpet. And so what we ended up doing is actually cutting a little square of it out for him. And that actually kind of like mended that moment. And we stopped, and that's the kind of moment where we connect with other people and build that trust. And trust is really the fundamental component of relationships. That's what we're talking about. And those are the kinds of moments that we want to have, but less and less are able to. It's these strong relationships, the trust that drives these strong relationships, are how humans have accomplished anything, right? From beating the elements or beating competitors, the way that we do this is with other people. Communication, relationships, and trust. And that's what we're talking about today. So this is me. I just a little bit more of an intro. I told you that I do everything I can to kind of get the word out about company culture. So I write articles. I teach an MBA course in San Francisco to some awesome design business students. And of course, I've got my book. So a little intro for me, but let's go on to this statement, which is my definition of culture. There's a lot of great definitions of culture out there. I totally agree with all of them. Here's where I start from. This is where what I like to think about. Culture is the cause and effect of every choice you make. The reason why I landed on this is because culture is about decisions. And really, businesses are just decision-making machines. That's all they are. I don't care how many algorithms you're running, right? How much artificial intelligence you have. It is still about the humans making choices. The other piece of this is that it's a system. It's the input and the output, the cause and the effect of these choices. And that's what makes it so powerful, but also so insidious. So if your manager walks in or you start a Zoom call and they've had a bad morning and you kind of interpret it as this, like something that you did, perhaps misinterpret it, then you're feeling doubting yourself. And maybe that makes you a little bit more anxious and not able to deliver on the work that you can do the best that day. That is how culture can work, but it can also be the other way, which is if you are some manager or leader, then you're empowering and you're like, hey, great work on this. You feel good and you're able to support that. And then you can, as an individual, if your manager is giving you that love, you can then kind of turn that energy around. And that's what I think is so powerful about culture. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. What I wanted to start with is the 6 components of culture. So when I started thinking about and working on company culture about 15 years ago, what I realized is, one, there wasn't a sort of an agreement around that definition, which is why I came to that conclusion. But also, I realized it was more of this like fuzzy concept that nobody was really kind of articulating in a really compelling way. And I felt like I wanted to create some kind of framework, some kind of idea around how to help business leaders kind of get a toehold in their business to start to proactively design their culture, right? Not just react. So in the book, I talk about how culture isn't just ping pong and pizza. It's much more than that. It's a strategic management tool. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the 6 components. We don't have time to really dive into it, but of course, afterwards, if you want to learn more, you can go to greatmondays.com. I've got a lot of free tools. Happy to talk with you all about it. But let's just do a quick overview. So first of all, we start with purpose. This is why an organization exists beyond making money. This is your North Star or the peak of the mountain. So one example that I have written in the book is for IKEA, it's to create a better everyday life for the many people. So that's not telling you how you're doing it, but it's telling you why. Why am I showing up? Why are we working on flat pack? Why are we, creating these products? It's in order to create the better everyday life. I love that part, the everyday life for the many people. That's their whole point. So that's your why, that's your motivation. And one of the things people will ask or clients will say, "What do I really need a purpose statement?" Well, yeah, because what's going to happen is you're going to have it's going to be a day where an employee or multiple employees, they're working hard, right? Business isn't easy, and you're going to be up late or working hard at the end of a quarter or whatever it might be, and you're going to be asked that question, why am I here? And so you as a leader have to answer that question before they ask it. And there's a lot of really incredible power that comes with a well articulated purpose statement. Okay. Values. So values are something when you, if you know anything about culture, you typically think, okay, values. That's what most companies have. Values. They're kind of underutilized, and they are essentially the guardrails. This is, if we have our peak of the mountain, the values are your kind of like guards on the way up. And so it's like, what are the 3 to 5 behaviors that we're going to be working on in the next 2 to 3 years? So that's really, really powerful. So an example might be one of my clients, we've worked with them, and one of their values is called, we titled it Act and Own, which is acknowledge and own, because they had a challenge where the culture had basically kind of adopted this deference of like, well, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. It's not my job. So we wanted to emphasize this acknowledge and own, ownership. So that's an example of a value or a value headline. They need to be well defined. And again, lots of stuff, lots of more information there, but I'm not going to go into it. Now, like I said, the center point of culture is all about choices. It's behaviors. So if you think about, I've got my inspirational peak, I've got my values, my flags that are going to help me find that path. That path between those towards the top of the mountain are your behaviors. Those are the choices, right? So if one of my values is acknowledge and own, if there's an issue, a project isn't getting done and it's on my team, I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, because we have established and stated this is really important for me to own. I need to figure this out. This is something that the company, my manager, the leadership has articulated as really important. Okay, so that's the first 3: purpose, values, behaviors. Those are the design piece of it. Now, the second 3, recognition, rituals, and cues, are activation. That's culture activation or operationalization. So recognition, everybody has experience with a rewards program or a recognition program. What I will say is that it is most effective. Your recognition is going to be most effective if they are recognizing values-driven behaviors, values-driven choices. Lots of really interesting opportunities and possibilities here: peer-to-peer recognition, manager to employee, all bunch of different ways that you can do this. But that's what I want to call out here is values-driven choices, right? So if I am, in fact, have owned a project that maybe I wasn't the leader of, well, then someone should say, hey, great job, Josh. You were demonstrating Act and Own. So I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to, on Slack, hashtag Act and Own, and connecting to that, right? So other people see that. Oh, it's about the value. That's really important. Okay, so that's recognition. Rituals, this is what we're going to be talking about today: recurring activities that build and strengthen relationships. So rituals are how we build and strengthen relationships. We'll get into that. I'm going to go ahead and it's going to be all about the rest of this. So I'll skip that one, or skip going into that definition too deeply. And then finally, cues. We get busy. And we've got emails and quarterlies to deliver on, and projects and all these other things. How do we remember? So how do you help people? How do you remind people about what we're doing? Rob, I keep one of your folks that has helped me and been on some of the meetings has on their wallpaper the values of WorkTango, and I think that's a perfect example of those cues. Right. So it's like, oh, remember, this is what we're working on. This is really important, because if you create those values or you create that purpose statement and it just lives on the internet, buried in a folder somewhere, it doesn't matter. So you have to surface that. So digital, physical, behavioral reminders.
Okay. Josh, I know you're running into the rituals as the main focus of today's conversation. I thought I would just chime in and say that I've leveraged these pillars, and that's why I'm so passionate about this as a HR leader, as an executive leader, as a CEO of a company, when it came to building a great culture where we can succeed. And I also get the privilege of working with organizations on how they help recognize their employees or build rituals around listening to their employees in terms of what WorkTango does. So I've just seen a lot of this in practice and action to drive inspiration and engagement and retention. And I know this is the discussion of the book and kind of the content of it. So I urge people to take a look deeper, but I know we're really focusing on, rituals today. So I'll let you keep going here.
Yeah, Jennifer, the definition of rituals, let me back up. Let me see if I can, boop, 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 rituals. So these are recurring activities that build and strengthen relationships. Recurring activities that build and strengthen relationships. So let's get into that. Go. Oop, nope, do not exit full screen. Okay. Come on, baby. There we go. Okay. Rituals and relationships. Really, really important. Okay. So for the rest of the presentation, I can definitely share my slide deck, Sharon, no problem. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to answer two key questions. They are why and how. Why are we doing this? Why is it important to build these relationships? Why are we thinking about relationships in and what I'm calling relationship K in a distributed world? And then how will we address that? How will we address that? All right, ready? So let's start with why. All right, first and foremost, this is the point that I was making up front, which is relationships are the reason that businesses work. When you have a good team that trusts one another, that is tight, you are much more likely to be able to do your job well, right? Because without these relationships, it's just the tools. So that's number one. And what I like to say, and what I've articulated multiple times, is that relationships are the synapses of culture. I'll say that again. Relationships are the synapses of culture, which is to say that they are the connecting point for the kinds of behaviors. If you have people over here acting in a certain way successfully, those relationships are the way that those behaviors spread. Again, same with the other direction, right? If it's actually, you see, if you have a senior sales leader who is one of those high-performing jerks, then that's what success looks like, and that's going to get spread throughout the organization, and then everybody's like, yep, I guess that's how you succeed here. So relationships, that's what we're talking about. And as you probably have experienced over your, as you have all gotten more distributed, that those relationships and that time spent together is starting to decrease. So when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about the one of the pieces of information that moves with strong relations, moves across relationships, is a flow of ideas. The flow of ideas, and a great flow of ideas is going to drive innovation. So if you're an organization that really cares about innovation, new ideas, you need to be able to have strong relationships so that the good ideas can come from anywhere and should come from everywhere. That's what we're looking for here. So number one, why? Number one is innovation. When we have strong relationships, the ideas and the information flows across from people to people, from group to group. And if we want to welcome good ideas from everywhere, that is going to be, if we build those strong superhighways of information, that's one way you feel trusting, right? So innovation requires a little bit of a risk. So if you feel safe that you can share a crazy idea, that idea is going to be shared. Number two, okay, why number two? So let's start with this concept of intimate communities. So sociologists talk about intimate communities. Intimate communities are folks, groups of people who really are close in that they have a lot of exposure to one another, and they allow us to know what I call the who's and the what's of our company. The who's and the what's of our company. So you can see the diagram on the left of some company somewhere. There's project teams and, or departments. And then you can kind of see that they're somewhat connected. You've got some super connectors in the middle, but for the most part, they're not connected to other parts of the organization. Now, this is the common result. This is the common way a large organization of 200 people, 300 people might look. And 3,000, it gets even more severe. But what you want to do is actually connect with those folks that are outside of your group. Why? Because the more you know the who and the what, the more productive you're going to be, the more able that you're going to be able to share information and get information, right? So we're in the information economy. We are talking about how relationships are the synapses of culture. They're how work gets done. So sharing these big circles are the silos that might occur, or departments or groups. So let's build those relationships across these groups so that when you need something from accounting or you need a quick fix from IT, you can call and you already have a relationship with that person and they'll take your call, as one example, as opposed to, who? Sharon? I gotta go. I'm not gonna do anything extra for you. I don't know who you are. So if you connect with other people and you want to be able to share this information and understand where you need to go to get it, who knows that information, that's why relationships are important. So number 2, productivity. Productivity. All right. 2 out of 3 reasons. Let's do the third reason. Why are relationships important? All right. So interesting data point here. Most of the conversations we have are really gossip. They're mostly about other people and our interactions with other people. Why is that? Well, it's because we are trying to understand our context and learn who we can trust and learn about other people. We're kind of scaling our experience. So when we think about these conversations that aren't about work, what are we gaining? We're learning about other people. We're learning about one another. And that's really important. Now, this gossiping is actually called social grooming in animals and in chimps. So mammals build this trust and relationships with this activity of picking nits. They groom one another. And that is all about relationship building. Interestingly, in the early 90s, anthropologist Robin Dunbar studied groups of chimps. And he found that the maximum number of, most likely the group is going to top out at 150. Why? Well, the more people in a group, the more individuals in a group, not people, more individuals in a group, when we're talking and we're thinking about chimps, well, they're going to be more successful hunting and gathering, protecting young, raising their young, all of the things that they need in order to survive. But what happens at 150? Well, it requires time and energy to pick those nits, to develop those relationships. And anything over 150, the return on that investment is not worth it. So you see that top out. Now, what's interesting, let's bring this closer to home to our less hairy colleagues. 50 is pretty much the top where we kind of top out at work, because it's not life or death and we're busy, right? That's fine. So there's more people in this organization, but we kind of know about 50, and that's going to be your silo. That's your naturally developing silo. And so what is really critical to understand is that we need to extend ourselves and have tools, have rituals that allow us to understand, connect with, learn who we can trust beyond these 50 people. And so the third piece is really about culture. Culture, this is the behaviors, the choices, the decisions. If you're going to design your culture, if you're going to set expectations around what success looks like, well, then we need to be able to build these relationships. All right. So 1, 2, 3, those are the whys. Now let's talk about the how. Let's talk about the how. 3 tools to foster trust, relationships, and innovation in hybrid and distributed organizations. All right. The first one regular and rigorous gatherings. So no matter how many Zoom happy hours you have, you cannot replace in-person meeting. I know that's a kind of a bummer to say. That's the first thing that you're going to learn of how to build a distributed workplace is coming back together. But let me explain. So Brian Chesky, April 2022, announced that Airbnb employees can live and work anywhere. So this is the ideal. What they're essentially what he's saying is we're distributed forever. However, couple caveats, and the most important one, we'll meet regularly for team gatherings. So your team will probably connect in person every quarter for about a week at a time, some more frequently. Interesting. So when this came out, I thought, what is he doing here, right? You're like, Airbnb is like the ideal company. If anybody's going to be distributed and can make it work, right? It's like Airbnb is going to make it work. But what he's articulating and what I have seen even before this is there is power in thinking about establishing a regular cadence to gathering. So he's saying once a quarter. We're saying anytime that you can come together with anybody is going to be a huge boon to those relationships. Right. So it could be you could have a 2-3. There's a hybrid workplace. You could do a couple times a month. You can do 1 week every quarter, and you can even do once a year. Those are the possibilities. There's a lot of fully distributed organizations. Automatic, the company that runs WordPress, is one of those. Buffer is another. 100% distributed once a year, even twice a year. They actually bring everybody together. They invest a lot of money to bring everybody together. Now, Rob, you had a question about this.
Yeah, when we were first looking at this this deck, I was like, well, what happens if it's just not possible? Like it is just so cost prohibitive. You have people in dozens and dozens or hundreds of cities. Like if we can't make this a reality, what are the recommendations of what we could do otherwise?
Yeah, exactly. So great question. Any way that you can get together with anybody in the company is better than not. So other examples that I've seen my clients take, regional. So if there's folks that happen to be in the same city and just want to get together for a coffee or co-work in a co-working space, that's a great way to do this. No problem. I think that's awesome. If you're visiting a city and you have employees or coworkers in that city, make the effort to reach out and connect with those folks. I actually have a client and they have a couple hubs, and and they have those cities listed as a Slack channel. So, hey everybody, Donna is coming to Austin. Who's up? Who's open for, who wants to grab a drink? Who wants to do some co-working? Who wants to blah, 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 right? So you can do this on a smaller scale. And if you can, I think that's also a really wonderful way to do it. Even if it's not something that happens regularly, face-to-face time, really important. Figure out how to invest and make that happen. So it really becomes something that's even more valuable. How do you do this in a really powerful way? So that's number one. Okay, number two. If that was time and cost intensive, number one, number two is much easier, a lighter lift. And my glib answer is typically hashtag cats. This is how we build relationships, build and strengthen relationships. And what I mean by that is, if you have a Slack, internal communications on Slack or Teams or whatever you might do, you likely, and you have an organization of any size, you likely have a channel that's dedicated to cats, to the cat people or the dog people, or maybe even, the parents who are sharing kind of their appreciation for the different interests that they have. So that is a perfect example of finding an interest that folks across an organization might share. And a Slack channel is an easy way to do it. Doesn't have to be. I'll share another example in a second, but this is a great way to build rapport and relationships with those outside of your inherently intimate communities, right? Your project teams or your departments, those people that you're with all the time. You want to start to expand that and build those relationships outside of that. So if you have a sports team that you're passionate about, start that channel. If you are in charge of Slack, make sure that people have the ability to start their own channel and encourage them to do so. The more niche and the weirder, the better. This is a great way to use their own interests to drive participation. Because I'm sure that most of you have experienced this. Hey, we're going to do this thing. And everybody shows up, or some people show up to the first meeting, and then it's like the next one is not as well attended. And they're just not motivated. They're busy. But if you can find something that they're excited about, that they share, they have in common, go Mets, whatever it might be, that is going to be a great way to build and strengthen relationships. So, and you can go from there. You can share your picture of your cat, or, what's the bet on the sports team, or whatever it might be, question of the week. I don't know, whatever that might be, allow their interest to be driven. Now, there's a whole nother facet of this, which is activating and thinking about employee resource groups. So I love this. So this is from Thumbtack, a startup that connects people that need home services with providers. They have probably more than this at this point, but 8 employee resource groups. And that's a great way to have a common interest and something that we can come together, talk about maybe challenges for young parents, talk about opportunities. So maybe maybe everybody in a certain city comes together for an event, or maybe there's additional resources. This is beautiful. And yeah, totally. I love the branding on this, right? Like, it becomes an identity. It is an identity. I would be happy to wear any one of these t-shirts because they're so cool. And I think that's a great way to create community inside of your own company, your own brand. So great. The obvious, the dumb choice, the thing that you should absolutely do is start these Slack channels. Something that I am going to engage in because I have an identity as someone that is a Mets fan, or perhaps a veteran. So think about, and what I would love for everybody to do this at this moment is, what channel would you start? Not what channel would your what channel would you be interested in? Okay, perfect. Dog parents, exactly. That's what Barrett says. Podcasts, DIY projects, travel, great, of course. There's so many things that you're passionate about. What's another way? Boom, running group. I'm in it. I'm already signed up, Peggy. Metallica fans. Book club. We got 2 book clubs. That's awesome. Development resources. F1. Laura, didn't know that about you. That's awesome. CrossFit, gardening. Beautiful, right? I mean, come on. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about all these amazing things, right? So you think about it's like, what is the nerdiest thing that you could start and kind of put out there, right? Like, how many Dungeons and Dragons players are, in your organization? Who knows? Maybe you're the only one and the channel dies. That's okay. You put it out there. That's totally fine. So that's definitely beautiful, Rob. I love it. Lego. I would join that in a second. I have a set I haven't built yet over here that I got. So the Josh Rocks channel. Thanks, Sharon. I'd join it. All right. Number 3. Okay. So now this one is fairly, I would say, inexpensive to do, but requires some investment. Requires some investment of time and energy. Okay. So this one is all about questions and understanding. And what's awesome about questions and understanding this one is that there are 2 benefits, at least, let's say. When you're asking someone a question, when you're learning about them, you're going to ask them a question, you're going to learn about them, and you're going to actively listen, and you're going to think about, really learn how to be a good listener. So one, you benefit because you learn more about your work colleague. Two, they benefit because they feel heard and seen. In our super hectic, hyper-connected digital lives, where we just text back and forth all the time, it is rare that we actually stop and listen. This is something that we can do. Let's talk about the kinds of questions that we can start asking, both in our teams, our intimate communities that already exist, they're already close, and those that are a little bit further out. So there's 3 levels that I would kind of articulate here. And they're dependent on, you have permission from the group, I would say, to ask these questions, depending on how close, how much trust you've already built. So the first column is fun things, can ask anybody. Haven't met them before, these are the questions you're going to ask. If you have worked with them before and you built a little bit of trust, you can ask some you things, which is more about you, a little bit deeper. And then if you have good relationships and you have a strong team and you want to continue to build that, you want to ask about work things, how do we work? So let's look at some examples here. So fun things, these are, what books on the top of want to read? What's the podcast that you were listening to? Where in the world would you want to go? I'm not exposing that much of myself, right? It's fairly easy to kind of lean into. And I love the favorite breakfast food. We did this yesterday with a client kickoff. This is pretty much what we do, and it works every time. It's like we just get to learn a little bit about everybody, and you're like, I like omelets, I like runny eggs, I only drink coffee, whatever it might be, easy. But it also is so great to be able to connect with that, right? I just feel closer to other folks. So these are questions you want to ask at some point that you can really connect. You can start to learn about somebody. If you're new on the team, welcoming somebody in, this is where you want to start. Then you can start to get into you things. Your team's been regularly meeting, or you have kind of established a little bit of rapport. You can start asking questions like, what are you grateful for? What are you excited about this week? What 3 words would you use to describe yourself? These kinds of questions. I think you're starting to get a little bit deeper, right? Like this is where you're starting to do some of this deeper work, right? So this is, if you are a regular team and you want to do some, start the conversation, start the call with this, great. These are the things. Now, the last one, let's get this one. We need more trust and rapport and honesty. Sure, Maggie, I'll go back to that in just a second. This one is if you really have a good relationship, because you're going to be revealing some things you want to be able to trust, right? Lean into that. What should I know about communicating with you? What's a mistake each one of us made recently? Whoa, that is a scary question to answer. But if you have that power, you have that trust, that is a great way to make it okay to share about, to say it's okay to, take some risks. These are the kinds of questions that you really starting to get in the groove. So I'll go back for a second because Maggie said, let's go back to the, oops, bump. And so here's what I'll say. What has happened as we become more distributed is we have filled our days with Zoom meetings, and the Zoom meetings start and you immediately jump into the agenda. We need to make more time to get to know one another because we no longer have the tools or the opportunity that the square footage and the water cooler and the running into the hallways provided us. We don't have those interstitial moments. So we actually have to take on the responsibility of creating the space and actively working on those interstitial moments, on building those and building those relationships. And these are great ways to do it. Your weekly stand-up, before everybody checks in, let's ask a question. Everybody has to answer. Or maybe you do a round robin, and every week or every day, someone else asks another question. There's a lot of ways that you can build this in, and it is powerful, this idea of questions and really thinking about, really going to, I want to know about you. And that person feels seen, and then you connection. So I love it. So Barrett just said, we always do a better know a teammate contest. Better know a district, I think is what this is referencing. I get everyone's favorite whatever, and then the team gets a guest sheet where they match teammate with favorite. I love it. Beautiful, right? So Metallica is going to be for Rob, and then Guns N' Roses someone else, and then Fish is somebody else, or whatever the music thing is. Or bring your favorite cap, right? Like, what's your favorite hat? Or what's your bring a concert tee. And then, you have this visual, right? Like, bring a thing. Like, that's a great way to do it, right? Bring a thing. Nice. I can show you something about myself. These are all things I can learn. What are you grateful for? Classic, right? Gratitude's the attitude. All right. So what we've talked about, humans, the only way humans have accomplished anything ever is through strong relationships. We are seeing a crisis of relationship decay because of our distributed work. We're all relearning how to work. We are possibly suffering under culture debt, that you have not invested in the culture of the organization during the lockdown and during the pandemic. And so now we don't know each other as well anymore. But we have to. We must, in order for our business to work, in order for our companies to work, if we want to be innovative, if we want to be productive, if we want to have trusting relationships where we can feel comfortable with one another to do our best work, that's what we need, right? So culture, productivity, innovation, that's our why. And our how. We're going to do regular, rigorous gatherings to the best of your ability, common interests and causes, questions and understanding, learning about each other. Relationships are the synapses of culture, and that is why it's so important. I found this amazing quote: trust is the lubrication that makes it possible for organizations to work. Beautiful. Could not have said it better myself, except for I revised it a bit, because I also think it's how families work better. This is Lucas now. He's 16. He still has the square of the carpet that we cut for him. That was the power of that moment. That was how incredible that one opportunity of sitting and listening. That is just so incredible. However, it's not like, okay, good job, we did it, we raised our son, dun, 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 right? Like, that's not the way this works. We have to do it again and again and again. And that's what your job now has become as a leader, a manager, someone who's not even, doesn't have VP in their name or their title. It is your job now, for better or worse, to invest in those relationships, because everybody does better when relationships are strong. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. I am super excited to tell you that I'll be launching Great Mondays Radio probably early March, and I would love to have you as a guest. I'm looking for executives, HR leaders, and culture leaders of high growth technology companies. That's who I'm going to be interviewing. So please, you can apply now. Go to radio.greatmondays.com, find out about it. And then once I do launch, I will be shouting from the rooftops on LinkedIn and all that stuff. So thank you so much. Head to greatmondays.com. Lots of resources there. Buy the book if you're able to. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Back to you, Rob.
So, Josh, first off, you brightened my day with the presentation, literally too. The sun just came out here in Toronto, which is nice. And I was actually laughing when you said, "I'm done. I'm done as a parent." You left the screen, and I
Yeah.
actually use a quote. I use a quote a lot when it comes to trust. That I read somewhere and can't find where it came from, but it said, "When it comes to trust, you're either building it or eroding it. There's no in between." And that idea that consistently having to work at it and create those rituals and those cues and things in our organization and culture to build these levels of connection, which again is so critical in this distributed workforce. There's some really great questions here, and thank you for leaving time for us to get to them. And
Mhm.
they're all upvoted, so I'll kind of start with the first one. We'll do this by committee, but really good question from
Okay, I
Anita.
just opened them
Uh,
up, so I gotta flip through. All right, which one do you want to start with?
so I have it sorted by upvotes. But the first one was actually interesting. What do you suggest for getting together for introverted employees? They don't care to get together for drinks or social activities.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's true. I'm married to one of those, and I understand that it can be intimidating to kind of do that. Now, I think in our new distributed world, we're forced to invent new ways to get together, and so introverts are. I've read a few articles that introverts are more comfortable on Zoom, so that's a great way to do it there. And some of those tools, I think some of those Q&A tools, I have a client who's like, look, half of our staff that you are asking, these amazing questions to aren't going to answer live. They're just not going to unmute. So, so funny comments. Sorry. All right, I'm trying to ignore it. So those for those folks, we give them time to kind of feedback and fill in the blanks, right? I think Warren, I think, was the person who said that they do this kind of like, what's your favorite, and then you match it up on the computer or on the paper, whatever it is, right? So those are great, really powerful ways to do it. In person, I think it's just a function of fewer people. If you just say, hey, I'm in town, one person, well, let's grab lunch. If they're an introvert, or if you're an introvert, you might become more comfortable with that. So I think there are definitely ways. This is not only for extroverts activity. There's a lot of ways that we can do it. And so I really believe that we just need to become aware of and inclusive of those folks who aren't about to show up and dance on the table, like some people I know.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Next question, Josh. When creating or assessing, and this came from the beginning components about culture and
Mhm.
a lot of upvotes. I think it's on people's
Mhm.
mind. But when creating or assessing company core values, should they reflect the current company culture and goals, or there be aspirational in what the company hopes to embody in the future, or something else?
Yes, I love this question. So my vision. So okay, so let's just start with, I think the majority of companies have really crappy values. And it's not so much the word themselves, but how they get applied and how they're used. I have a whole video on a whole presentation on why I think your values suck. So you can check that out on my YouTube channel. But what I believe that values are due for a complete rethink. And the way that I work with my clients is that I say they're not forever. So that's number one, so that it's more easily to commit to, right? And what I like to do is say, it's something, don't waste one of your 5 values. I say you can only have a maximum of 5, 3 to 5. Don't waste one of your 5 values on something that you're already nailing. So my client that had the acknowledge and own, the ack and own value, they have a really strong, incredible diversity and inclusion program. Like, it is an incredibly diverse workplace. And they were like, oh, of course we're going to have diversity as one of our values. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. I think we can include it, but you're already doing pretty well. Why don't we use that to stretch forwards towards the things that you would like to be working on, right? So the 3 to 5 key pieces, key kinds of choices that you're going to be making to move the needle for the next 2 to 3 years. I want you to stretch forward. Now, not something where you're like, No way. Like everybody goes, well, that's ridiculous, right? We're not talking about a BHAG. The BHAG can live in the big, hairy, audacious goal. That can be in your purpose statement. Your value should be like, the response should be, yeah, yes, I think we can do that, right? Like that's the kind of response you want. And so okay, Rob, tell me about yours. Are yours stretching forward?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways. Yeah, I felt compelled to share them, but we create technology to build better workplaces. So our concept is improve work lives in parentheses, because we spend a lot of our waking time at work. And if you can make work a great experience, that translates to life. All about ownership and that culture you mentioned earlier in that example, 1% better every day, continuous improvement. But the concept of working together and the relationships required to tango together in our language and making it our own. That's really, it's critical. You don't get to customer sat, or you don't get to business success unless you have employees with all the right inputs and connections and what they build and do every day. So we actually just rolled out new values, and I'm super proud of them, which is why I popped them up.
Good, excellent. So all right, so I hope that answers the question. It's the short answer is values should be like a stretch goal that don't seem impossible, but like it's going to require some effort.
Yeah. Couple more minutes for a couple more questions here. How do you suggest to create relationships with people outside your department or community? And just if I could chime in, Josh, quickly, this is actually something I think our organization does really well. We recently merged two companies together. So when you think about the need for relationships and trust and the inability for us to bring people from dozens of cities together all the time, we actually rotate our executive meetings into cities that have higher propensity of employees. So I was in Austin last week, where there's a huge propensity. They're coming to Toronto soon, where there's a number of employees. Chicago is in May. So this is the way that we at least try to do that, not only have meetings or in an office, but have social gatherings as well. And I found it helped with some of those components outside of our groups and ERGs and other social committees that exist.
It is incumbent upon, this really is, culture is a bottom up, middle out, top down effort, right? That's why it's hard. However, establishing this new way of working is really incumbent upon leadership. And leaders need to realize that they need to, and this is it. This is game time, people. Like, this is what you do. So that is ultimately where I think the responsibility is, right? Great. We're saving a ton of money on, square footage, not having office spaces. But guess what? That's not free money, right? Like that should be going into that relationship building. So that's what I would suggest. So, okay. So back to that question, I got kind of lost in the answer.
How do you suggest relationships with people outside your department or even
outside your department? You got to find ways to yeah, absolutely. So I think those Slack channels, finding other ways to kind of build those. So the way that it used to happen, right? So when I was a graphic design student, I worked at Landor, the big identity firm that does all the airlines and all this stuff. And we would have a summer, there was obviously a winter holiday party, but there was a summer picnic, and they'd pile everybody into a bus and go up to, Napa, and we, drank wine for the day. Right. So it's like when you have those big opportunities where you're like, oh, I'm just meeting people from wherever just because we happen to be there. Right. Like that's what it used to be. So how do you create those opportunities and facilitate that? There's another tool. I'm a huge fan of another tool called Donut. I think it's donut.ai, and they do these introductions. I think those are great, where it's just sort of random, like, you don't know this person, let's set up a lunch date. There's also there's a bunch of these little plugins that work really, really well as well. So I don't know, did WorkTango have a tool like that?
Not for randomizing it, but definitely for building connections on one-on-ones and other things as well.
Right. I didn't want to promote the competitors, but that's good.
No worries. I'm just looking at time, and then again, I want to be really respectful for everyone's time on the call and yours as well, Josh. We didn't get to all the questions, but
oh my gosh, these are so good.
I know. It's tough. I don't want to cut it off, but I know
Yeah.
people have other places they need to go. So I want to just end with a couple of thank yous. First off, for everyone joining today, being part of this community, and again, it's I love being able to bring people together to be inspired and engaged, and obviously big thank you to Josh for bringing that to the conversation today. Again, just a lot of really good takeaways, reminders, tangible things we could take away. So appreciate your effort and time to be with us today. And also just as a group of people behind the scenes, Alicia's on this call who loves Lego, which is why I brought it up. And we know that because we have these conversations and to make these happen as well. So just thank yous across the board. One thing I will say, if you don't mind, we'll just go to the next slide there. Josh, just our next webinar is May 17th on a speak up culture. Stephen Chedlecki, I've actually known him from a past life. He used to work with Simon Sinek and his group. Really great insights and excited for the next one as well. So thank you again, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the Wednesday and week, and take care. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.